The Philadelphia 76ers are in an incredibly interesting situation right now with the potential return of Joel Embiid at the end of the season and a very interesting offseason coming up for them as well. The Sixers are one of the most intriguing teams in the entire league right now. So as of right now, as of the recording of this video, Joel Embiid says that he is going to return to the Sixers this season, regardless of what the record is, regardless of what the playoff situation is, regardless of when he returns, he's going to come back if he's healthy and he's going to try and play. And prior to his injury, the Sixers were one of the best teams in the league. He was playing at an MVP level, and clearly him returning to the team makes them a true threat in the Eastern Conference and one of the better teams in the conference, despite how much they've struggled without him on the floor. But to me, the interesting part of all of this is what this injury potentially means for the offseason for Philadelphia, an offseason where they have a ton of question marks, a ton of opportunity as well, but this roster is probably going to look much, much different once this season is over, and the decisions that they make, not only this offseason, but the following, is largely going to depend on how they look in this upcoming postseason. So the biggest part of all this for Philadelphia in terms of the offseason is when you look at their payroll, next year they have Joel Embiid signed to a long-term extension. They have a non-guaranteed contract with Paul Reed, and that's it. They have nobody else signed long-term. Now, Tyrese Maxey is going to get an extension, so it's not like they literally have, 2.5 max cap space at slots. Like Tyrese Maxey's extension is there, it's in there, it's going to happen. It's probably going to be a max extension for Tyrese Maxey. The only reason they haven't done it is just to kind of create some flexibility up until that point. But the point is, Philadelphia, if they renounce the rights to all their free agents that aren't Tyrese Maxey, is going to have an opportunity to bring in at least one max caliber player alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey this upcoming offseason, with some more flexibility to do even more than that, in addition to potentially adding pieces in a trade. And so depending on how things go this offseason, or excuse me, this postseason, they can kind of evaluate where the roster is and where they need to potentially improve. And to me, there are two kind of options here in terms of what direction Philly could go in the offseason. Option number one is they could go the route of, let's go and try and get a star. Let's go and try and get a guy to complement Tyrese Maxey, a guy to complement Joel Embiid, someone that is a high caliber player. There's a couple of very interesting names here. Some guys that I think are unlikely to leave in free agency are guys like Pascal Siakam, who Philadelphia was interested in at the trade deadline, couldn't make a deal. I think he's re-signing in Indiana. Same thing with OG Anunoby with the Knicks. But depending on how the season ends with the Clippers, Paul George could potentially be available. That is an option. DeMar DeRozan is a complimentary option, although not exactly a Daryl Morey kind of guy. He's certainly one. And LeBron is also an option. LeBron is certainly an option for Philadelphia if he does want to leave LA, if maybe he wants Bronny to come to Philadelphia, whatever the case may be. The Sixers, the point is, they're going to have an opportunity to bring in somebody. The problem is the options aren't fantastic if you assume that OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are staying, because you start looking at like Klay Thompson, maybe the possibility of LeBron, maybe the possibility of Paul George. And it's unfortunate because Philly's in such a good situation in terms of being able to add pieces. There's just not, multiple max caliber guys that they're going to potentially be fighting over, which leads me to the other, I think, more interesting option, where Philadelphia looks at their roster and they say, okay, Tyrese Maxey is an all-star, potentially all-NBA caliber player this year. Embiid's the best player in the league when he's healthy, or at least an MVP caliber player, depending on your opinion of Joel Embiid. Why don't we just fill the roster out with a ton of other guys that just complement those two skill sets? Why do we need another star to take the ball away from Embiid or Maxey? Why can't it just be those two guys' team? They're incredibly talented, and let's just build around them. Maybe we give Klay Thompson $20-25 million a year to be the complement alongside Tyrese Maxey. Maybe we go out and get a ton of wings, a ton of floor spacing, and we use our, whatever it is, $60 million in cap space, and we get all of these complementary pieces and build out this roster that is so deep and has so much versatility that it complements these two guys perfectly. That's a situation that is realistic for Philadelphia. Like, depending on how the season ends, realistically, Philadelphia could go in the offseason and say, okay, we're going to grab Klay Thompson, Bruce Brown, and Drew Holiday. We're going to add them to the team, and those are our guys alongside Embiid and Maxey, and then we're going to fill out the bench with, some MLE guys and some smaller contracts. That, to me, is a really, really interesting team. I mean, obviously, it's pretty small with those four guys alongside Embiid, but theoretically, right, like you could go with that kind of a path, or maybe it's just, Drew Holiday and Bruce Brown and someone else, but there's just a lot of interesting kind of middle tier free agents, not super like max level, multiple of those kinds of players. And I've always kind of wanted a team to build this way that doesn't go after the third star, but has the space to go out and just get really, really high level complementary players. I mean, think about like the team that Boston has built this year with Porzingis and Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. And then also, oh my gosh, now they have Derek White. Now they have Drew Holiday. I think Philadelphia could build a team kind of similar to that, although obviously through free agency rather than, through the draft and trades. And so if it was up to you guys watching the video, what would you rather do? Would you rather replace the Tobias Harris spot with like DeMar DeRozan DeRozan or someone of that caliber and then add some complementary pieces? Or would you rather go out and get, Drew Holiday, Bruce Brown, and another piece and use that cap space in that way? Because it's great to have cap space. It's awesome that Philadelphia has planned this way. It's kind of always been their plan. Again, it's the reason they didn't do the Maxey extension. It's one of the reasons they didn't re-sign James Harden last offseason. They always wanted 2024 cap space, but you have to actually do something with it. And you have to actually use the money. Otherwise, it doesn't actually help you unless you sign a ton of these one-year deals. And so I'm curious, which kind of lane would you guys rather go in? I personally would much rather, if the possibility exists and these guys are available, I'd rather have, Drew Holiday and a couple of other, complementary pieces, because I think that Maxey and Embiid are just that good. You don't really need another star on this team. Now, of course, the problem with any of these, situations here is you have to renounce the cap holds to all these guys, right? So in a situation in which you are bringing in these complementary pieces, you are losing, Tobias. You're not losing Maxey, but you're losing, Tobias Harris and some of the other complementary pieces. But I think Sixers fans would probably be okay at this point with losing Tobias Harris. But the reason all this is interesting is because Joel Embiid's 29, almost 30 years old, coming off of a significant injury, a couple seasons in a row now of significant injuries for him, and obviously a bigger guy. As great as Joel Embiid is, I think it's realistic that he might have like 1 or 2 years left of like peak Joel Embiid. And if you're the Sixers, that's a terrifying proposition, because it makes this offseason, it frames this offseason as basically like an all-in kind of situation for them. Not truly all in terms of we need to trade all of our picks and we need to spend all of our money, but if you're going to try and capitalize on a closing window for championship contention in Philadelphia, then this offseason is as important of an offseason as they have ever had. And the decisions that we're talking about in this video, the possibility of getting a third star, getting complementary pieces, are some of the most important decisions that the franchise has ever had to make, because Embiid is incredibly important to the franchise in its history overall, as well as to what they could possibly do in terms of winning a championship. And I hope they make the right decisions, because I want to see what Embiid looks like in a championship chase. I want them to be able to maximize the possibility of what he could be. And I know this sounds like a really pessimistic outlook on kind of the window in Philadelphia and what Embiid could be, considering this guy was an MVP caliber player, the leader for the MVP at the time that he got hurt. But typically, when you're dealing with bigger players, especially lower body injury issue kind of guys, the careers fall off quickly. They fall off way quicker than you want them to, way quicker than you expect them to. And I'm afraid that Joel Embiid might be one of those guys. And so interestingly for Philadelphia, they have all this opportunity, right, in the offseason. They have all this cap space. They have a couple of picks that they could trade. They've got some interesting young players. But now they're in a situation where like this opportunity, it has to be capitalized on or else, right? Like this is very much an all-in offseason for them, obviously depending on what they do in the postseason here coming up. But I'm not expecting a ton from Philadelphia in the postseason, because it's just going to be so difficult for Embiid to just come back, be an MVP caliber guy, and have them be one of the best teams in the East when he's been gone for so long and all these other teams have been, playing normally with all of their guys and kind of been, tuning up for the postseason. I find it hard to believe that they're going to be like a real factor on the way to the conference finals or anything, even if Embiid does return in plenty of time. And so it really does point to this offseason of like, if they get this wrong, maybe they are looking at either an Embiid trade request in a year or two, or just him not being the same kind of guy. He's still going to be good, but typically these guys fall off really quickly, especially guys that take as much contact as Embiid does and are as big as Embiid is. And I'm just really, really intrigued by the possible offseason here coming up for Philadelphia.